Hi there. You might recognize me from last season's finale. I'm Jennifer Wallace Fields, visual artist, Alabama native, and your new host of Monograph. I'm so excited to welcome you to a brand new season where we will continue to celebrate and explore the talent in our own backyards, or in today's case, kitchens. We're starting out in the home and studio of painter and chef and dear friend, Roscoe Hall. Before we dig in, let's take a moment to learn about his journey.
It is difficult to be a Black painter in America right now, and way before, obviously, but in my spoiled generation, you can get pigeonholed by telling Black stories. And it's funny, because not everyone knows them, but here's the deal. If you're painting Black people on canvas, right, people look at it as if it's like just the same old story about Black people. But really, you're telling a whole different story. Moved to Alabama probably in '93. Mother lived in Tuscaloosa with my family who started Dreamland. I grew up in the restaurant. Like when I came home on Fridays, I'd have to go into the restaurant behind the bar and say hello to her, talk about homework. And then Dreamland took off. I got comfortable, I guess, in the restaurants from being around her. Just talking in front of customers and paying attention, like, not paying attention to other people, just knowing it was like our connection. But my mom always made sure I experienced art, and our house was covered in art, like scary paintings of James Brown and Miles Davis, like scary as shit. Like, it was like, The Cosby Show was also a huge introduction. I guess I can't say that, but whatever. Cosby Show had excellent art collection. It rotated constantly, like the famous procession piece with like the Black family walking down with the umbrellas. I'd copy that all the time. Like, we were seeing Black art in America actually on TV. When I started cooking, I started cooking because a bunch of punk kids started cooking, and I knew that was the easy way to get a job. It was like dishwashing, you become a line cook, you get free food, and you get a little paycheck. I just thought it was a job, because I always use it as survival to move places. When I graduated college and left Bottega and went to San Diego and started working out west, because back then, California cuisine was like the way Korean food is now. Like the way kimchi is now. Eating a fig wrapped in prosciutto was that in the 90s. It was like so hot, and farmers markets were a thing that wasn't a thing. So it was exciting, but I remember getting my first job at Chez Panisse. 2 years, I was homeless in San Francisco while I worked at one of the best restaurants in the United States. I paid $1,000 a month to park my car, and I'd stayed in an abandoned house next to Gilman Street, where like Rancid and Op Ivy and all those dudes are from. And there was a bunch of cooks randomly, and a bunch of like punk kids who crashed at this house. So I would either stay there after work or I'd go like party with a girl. And I would go back to my car. I'd take the bus to my car and change clothes and go to one of the nicest restaurants. Moved to New York, went to Momofuku. That changed my whole perspective on what I was doing as a chef. It made me feel like I'm part of a team again. It was diverse. It was like that punk rock dish is more of a lifestyle. Like, we were professionals, and that's when it like turned up a little bit. And then I moved to Portland, Oregon. And kind of low key, like I cooked at every restaurant Portland had, but like I went strictly art and did pop-ups every now and then, like in illegal spaces. We'd get tickets. I think the entire time I was learning how to be a chef, I only cooked European American cuisine. Like, I didn't know where I fit in the culinary world until I moved back to Alabama. And then I found my wedge. I found a voice to like what my food is and what I could serve and what I would call like a dish that made sense. And that's when like art and food kind of gelled up. When I moved back here, I was like, I want to tell my own story a little bit. Like, I want to talk about like crack. And like, I'm tired of talking about the 60s and the 50s. I want to talk about the 80s and the 90s. Like, let's talk about New Jack City and like what crack did. Like, crack really affected me. My dad was a crackhead. My uncle was a crackhead. Everybody was a crackhead, like everybody. I remember growing up in Chicago and seeing our family was so well together. Like the whole community was great. It was like being in the Cosby Show. And then when crack hit, like 87, everything, you had to grow up so much faster, you know? Like you ended up being a protector of your own. That was really weird. A kid shouldn't have to, at age 10, you just don't want to do all that. And I'm trying to tell that story of negligence, of like, how do you build a community out of like just being numb, you know? Because like, if you go through all that, 26 years, 27 years, whatever, trying to hit a level of excellence for someone else's vision, trying to code shift or whatever in order to get in the door in those places, in order to be seen in the art world, in order to do all that. You go through the crack era and you grow up a little bit too fast. Like you're in a racial date, you get shot by the Klan. Like you get really numb and like sterile, and you forget that you are a representation of where you come from. So I felt like it was time to tell a weird like black punk rock, like folk art kind of story. And that's where the narrative got deeper. I always wanted to figure out how to like incorporate the food culture part of me into the painting without being like, I paint apples. I can't even paint an apple. But so the only way I could think about that was to use the spices that make recipes delicious and figure out how to make pigments out of them. And then, so that became like turmeric, black pepper. When I worked at Rodney Scott's, we started building our own charcoal. And I was like, oh man, I could take that home, pulse it up in the food processor and use that as my charcoal and like dust my paintings. And it also will tell a story about regionality and the Creole-ness of who I am. I've learned so much about the South through, I learned more about regions through food than I do anything, obviously, but luckily I still cook private affairs where I work at a farm. Sometimes like I can still dig deeper of like the origins of where things come from. And I'm using produce to create my own pigments. Like it just gets weirder. But I would say the more I dig deeper, the more I enjoy the Southeast, because it's more, I know the truth almost, as much as I think. I can believe in something that I think is true. If I'm gonna create legacy in some sense of, not a monetary gain at all, obviously, but in some sense of that's gonna last long and my work can hit museums and be on a wall, beyond the ingredients that go into it, it better have an amazing story that encompasses like what I thought about the time of my region and like what it expresses. And my kids, if they don't like it or not, they'll be able to be like, that's his stuff. He was talking about this. He was so angry. He loved okra, you know? How are you?
Good, how are you, Roscoe?
Good to see you.
Good to see you too. What are we getting into today?
We are gonna make some weird stuff. We're gonna
I'm ready.
make a paint pigment out of yams.
Awesome. I'm here for it.
Uh-oh.
What's that?
This is the yams that are dehydrating in the old Instant Pot.
Oh.
Look.
Wow.
Basically, you cut them real thin as you can. Oh, that's hot. That's really hot. You cut them as thin as you can. This is a mixture of obviously sweet potato pills and the actual meat. They're from York, Alabama. You want one?
That's awesome.
It's just a chip. Ow!
Ooh!
You want to put those in there?
Yes.
Put you to work, Chef.
Should I put all of these in there?
Yeah, go for it. Let's get wild. This is all trial and error. You can like, do it with anything. I've done it with beets, hibiscus, turmeric, ginger. Always put the lid on.
Pro tip.
Start it slow. I'll show you what we don't want. Look at all that.
Wow.
Yeah, dude. So give me your hand. See how it's still kind of gritty?
Oh, yeah.
So what you can do, this is crazy. I've never really shown anyone this. Sift that through. You want to have a go at it, Chef?
Yes, please.
It kind of goes into the whole, you're a chef, so use everything you got kind of deal.
Yeah.
And that's the beginning of what we're gonna do. Smell it, embrace it, put your nose in it. I laid out some stuff for us.
Great.
All right? This is your mise en place. You know what that means.
I do.
All right. What you want to do, where'd I put those things at? Yeah, we're good. We're trying to make a little paste. You always add, because it's so fibrous and it is like an ingredient that can go bad, vodka or any type of alcohol will help. It took me a while to learn that because all my paintings started getting mold on them.
Oh.
You don't
So
want
that makes it more stable.
Yeah. Stir it up till it becomes like a sludge.
Okay.
Takes 10 grams, match with like 2 grams of vodka and about 5 grams of acrylic like base, and it'll get you like enough paint to do like a full back coat.
And that's your recipe that you like, trial and error.
Yeah, I write it on all my paintings. You can mix this with oil also to make a smooth. That's delicious. Go ahead and eat it. I don't do that. So what you can do now, you have this sludge, right?
Yep.
You can go ahead and add it to an actual paint, or you can build up an actual paint pigment out of what you have. Because I use so much fiber in fabrics, this stuff rocks and it stiffens.
Yeah.
So you can use this a little bit also. Hit it.
Okay. Now, this as a paint, like how would you say it holds up as far as like longevity or archival process? Like, will there
Archival
be...
process is tight. Like it, when mixed with acrylic primer, it just flows like acrylic paint. Because normally in acrylic paint, it's usually like flour and some unique dye.
Because I was thinking about like, you know, in the Renaissance, a lot of the
Like tempera.
Renaissance painter, they would use unstable inks and paints on purpose because it was like, you know, if you gotta see the sunset to see the sunset. Like
Yeah.
I'm only gonna make this last a certain
Yeah.
amount of time. So I
Which is
didn't know.
a very punk rock thing to do.
Absolutely.
We're
I
not
mean,
there yet, Chef.
I think Renaissance Sunset might be my new band name.
This is the color of a yam.
Yes.
But I love doing it because it adds more to the story about where I live and what I trace in like both careers. You know what I mean?
That's awesome.
And it's kind of like a scratch and sniff. I mean, you should never scratch a piece of art.
You can sniff it though.
You want to go paint with it?
Yeah, let's do that.
All right.
While we move down to the studio to try out our handiwork, let's check out another visual art storyteller. From musicians to venues, Craig Legg tells the vibrant story of Birmingham's rich musical history through his paintings.
Henry Miller once said, as a writer, I never get up in the morning and admire what I've done. It's never good enough. But as a painter, I can get up at 3 o'clock and look at what I've done, and it's great. You know, I always wanted to be a writer. I wanted to be Dostoevsky, Kerouac, Melville. That's why I joined the Navy. So for 20 or 30 years, I was trying to be a writer, and I became a poet, and I was in the spoken word scene. But 10 years ago, I sat down and said I'm gonna teach myself to paint. And I've been painting ever since. I did collage and assemblage before I started painting, because I knew I could stick things together and do that. But painting is a little bit more of a learned talent, skill thing, and so that takes a lot of practice. I grew up in Homewood. I was an athlete, not an artist. Graduated Shades Valley, 68. I grew up going to the Armory shows and the Shower of Stars. We did not have the infrastructure back then. In fact, we didn't even have, nobody had really much of a live music scene until the 70s, music scene as we know it. When all these teenage bands started, the only place they could play, the places they mostly played were fraternity and sorority lead-outs and dances, and then high school sock hops and dances. Mainly I get ideas from books. In the art world, you know, people are big on themes. Since I have no training in the art world, I'm a little bit different, and so I look for themes, but I'm really into history, in addition to all of the above. So, you know, about 8 years ago, I conceived my first, what I call trading card series. And they're small paintings that have the essence of the classic trading card where you get the player on the field or at bat or something, and then you get a little bit of text, name, team, and all that. And I've done history of Birmingham artists. I've done history of Birmingham jazz. And, you know, I think this rock and roll is about my 8th series. But trading cards are they're quirky, and you get, instead of the players are the most important, but it takes other things. It takes the infrastructure. So in the series, you know, it's 80% or so players, but the infrastructure is real important, by which I mean radio DJs, radio stations, record stores, record store people. Venues are very important, sound engineers, sound studios, promoters, concert promoters, all that stuff is vital. My job was made much easier by a book that has been written on the history of Birmingham rock and roll by UAB Prof. Andre Millard, who's in the history department. He also writes books on the history of recorded music and devices. Now, there are no photos or images, so my research, the hard part, was I had to go online and Google everybody and try to find a pic of them from which to do a painting. But I learned that I don't need to follow the photograph exactly. I just need to know if, like, the bass player is tall and looks a certain way, or the singer is blonde and looks a certain way. I can kind of wing it after that. And at one point in the 70s, I just started casting people up against iconic record cover albums. I really am into local history, and this actually helps me study it. You can read one book or so, and it might or might not stick with you, but if you constantly, over a year's time, deal with it, you'll really see how it fits. I've had a lot of good comments on this from people, like I say, who've not read the book, and it's just a different element. They're seeing it. And all through reading the book, I was wondering what some of these people looked like. So it helps to see, you know, what they look like.
This texture on this paint is incredible.
It's kind of like a puff paint.
It is. So I know that you talk about, like, the intention between bringing, like, your painting career and your chef careers together. How do you feel like your chef life influenced your painting life in other ways?
I would say the kitchen gave me more organization in the studio, even though I can be more chaotic in the studio. But once it becomes to where you can talk about your practice and embody that, it actually flows perfectly together. Because when you create a restaurant or a recipe, you have a vision of a story, or, you know, what you're trying to tell. And it just goes hand in hand. And I would also say that the kitchen life, because it's so shoved down your throat and so stressful, the chance to express yourself with this and you don't have to serve anyone. If you show it, you can show it if you want, but there's no issues.
Right.
No one's gonna write on Yelp. Padma's not here.
You know that saying that, like, you shouldn't turn your passion into your career.
Oh yeah.
And
I think about it
you
every
like
day.
you did that like twice.
Yeah.
So are you pro that advice or against that advice?
I think because of the pivot,
Yeah.
I think it's fine.
Yeah.
It seems like everyone's doing that. Like food, I look at a composed dish. It has to tell where I'm from, it has to tell where we are in life, it has to tell a story about the farmers and my workers also.
Yeah.
And this is just me. So by leaving the kitchen, I still feel like I have to tell those stories. 'Cause I don't know how to do anything else.
Yeah. Do your kids ever join you?
Yes. My son, he does a lot of like filler. He does like majority of like all my backgrounds. So I'm curious how that's gonna pan out. But I would say, not to be cheesy, but if it wasn't for you, I don't think I would have kept going on this. Your support has kept me going. Even if I don't hear it, I just know, you know?
Oh.
Like that's one reason why you're good for this gig is because you understand art more than the average friend and average like human. You understand where something could come from, and you also question it, and you're not afraid to poke the bear when it comes to like who's being real and who's not.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like something may not make sense and you're gonna call them out on it. That's really scary. It's very chefy of you. You know? But you make people bring their A game, and I respect you for that.
I just have yam dust in my eye.
I'm choking.
I'm not crying, you're crying. Well, Roscoe, thanks for having us out today.
Hey, thanks for coming. This is great.
We'll close out this episode by visiting another painter studio, LA-based Stacy Elaine Dasho.
This idea of art like breathes and it's something that we sort of all can like touch, and it's like changes our lives and the way we are with people and brings us together, and it allows us to have fun and know each other. Like I want that for my family, I want that for me. My name is Stacy Elaine Dasho. I am an artist, a writer, a maker, a mom, an art enthusiast. My first love is writing, basically. I became a writer. I love writing about art, and I love meeting other artists, and that's a big part of my practice too. So not just making, but how am I engaging in the community? How am I supporting other artists? How am I learning from other artists? And I think like the process of learning about art never stops. It's so important to be an art enthusiast. That's why I like to say that I am one, because I feel like that's where it all started, just like being excited about art, wanting to meet other artists or like see something and like, how did that person make that? I got to interview, like a lot of my writing connected me to other people who really just gave me tips on like how to be an artist or how to be like living life as an artist. We engage in art a lot of times through a museum or a gallery, and I think that's a really special place. It's like going to church or something. It's like a very sacred, spiritual, isolated space for art, and it's really important. So what I'm about to say does not negate the necessity of that, but I think like my big thing and my own practice is how do I bring those pieces into the everyday life? Like how does that, like, I guess if we're gonna go with like the sort of religious comparison, like you go to church and then you're like, okay, that was in that space, and then how do I take whatever is in that space into my daily life, into my daily practice? And I think as a writer and as an artist and art enthusiast, how do I take what's in the gallery or the museum and make it meaningful to me, and also to other people maybe? Like, so it's not this sort of like high art, low art like thing. It's sort of like this everyday like kind of sustenance that we need to sort of have a full life. I think art is a great way for us to sort of like know each other's interiors, and I'm very interested in other people, not just how they present like this polished version of what they are or what they look like or what they feel like on a resume. You know, I'm more interested in like, you know, something that goes into a little bit more raw space, and I think my art practice is about that, and I think like the community is about that. You know, community, a group of artists, that way of being an artist, not just like I make things, I'm alone, and this is my business, this is what I do. Like people will tell you to, oh, you gotta do this, you gotta do that, oh, dress like this, be like this, and if you want to be taken seriously. And I'm like, well, I think the work will stand for itself, and I just feel like being yourself is the most important thing in your practice, and it's making work and knowing that you can and and just showing up for it is like the best thing. The way I start out is very messy, and it's almost sort of like a puzzle that I'm trying to figure out. It's a kind of an excavation in a way, you know, like I kind of make the canvas a little bit messy. It needs to be there needs to be lots of mistakes. I sometimes will kind of complete it almost where it looks sort of clean and nice, and then I'm like, it's too nice. Like it's like there needs to be more of a mess here, and I'll kind of like mess it up again, and I'll try to refigure it. The colors are off, you know. It's very time consuming. There's probably an easier way to do it, but I kind of like the longer way. It means that like the more I'm with a canvas, the more I have a relationship to it, and the more I have investment with it. So it feels good to me when I've really taken time. So when I do a commission, someone will give me something that's meaningful to them, like a piece of writing from their past, like a eulogy or like a date book that used to be their mom's or something like that, that just has like a lot of sustenance. And I will basically translate it into an abstract piece. And then it becomes sort of something else, you know. It's another form of care where I can sit with something that is meaningful to them. It doesn't just get buried under the bed or, you know, in a box somewhere. It's something that can be a time capsule for this time in their life. I guess the act of painting takes care of me. Just sitting with colors feels really nice. And the act of sitting with someone else's content feels like care for them. So in a way, we're taking care of each other.